Okay, so this is the third part of this video, and we're continuing to just write down the exact values of these type of questions here. What's going to make these questions a little bit different is we're going to be seeing what happens when we have negative angles and really utilizing a property that we learned in our previous lesson. So what we learned in our previous lesson is that if we have sine of a negative angle, we can just bring that negative out the front and now just deal with this. So now I'm just going to ask myself, what's sine of 3 pi on 2? I know that sine of 3 pi on 2 is going to be -1. So this is going to be -1, and I'm still going to have that negative out the front. So my answer is going to be just 1. And let me highlight my answer there. And then what I might do is draw for us a unit circle just so we can visualize what's going on there. The reason why I was able to answer this so quickly is because I know that 3 pi on 2 takes me, let me just grab another color again, takes me here to this point right here. That's 3 pi on 2. It takes me there, and then this is 0, -1. If we were to also think for a moment, if I wasn't to apply this property and instead just answer this question kind of by thinking about what it means for an angle to be negative, for an angle to be negative means I'm moving in the clockwise direction, so I'm moving this way, which would take me here, and this point is 0, 1. So the answer would just be 1. So just kind of two ways of thinking about it there. And that's the beautiful thing about maths. There's more than one way to answer a question. Okay, let's go on to our next one. Cos of negative pi. When I have a negative angle and I have cos, the great thing I can do is just get rid of the negative and just deal with that. So it's almost like it just disappears. I don't even have to think about it. Cos of pi is -1. So that's going to be my answer, -1. Then we come over here. When I'm dealing with tan, if it's negative, I need to bring that negative out the front. And now I just need to think to myself, what is tan pi on 6? I know that tan pi on 6 is going to be 1 on the square root of 3. And because there's a negative here, it's going to be -1 on the square root of 3. If you're struggling to get that exact value, just draw up your special triangle and everything will become clear. I did that so many times in the previous part, I'm not going to do it again. Okay. Let's go through some more challenging examples here. And again, as you can see, we're dealing with negatives. So the great thing is when I've got cos of a negative, we just ignore the negative. We just rewrite it like this. 7 pi on 6. Now I need to figure out a way of breaking this up. So I'm going to break this up into 6 pi on 6 plus pi on 6. Because that's going to add up to 7 pi on 6. This is simply going to be pi plus pi on 6, which means it's going to be in my third quad. If it's in my third quadrant, cos is negative in my third quadrant, right? So it's going to be negative cos of pi on 6. Cos of pi on 6 is going to be the square root of 3 on 2. And because it's negative, my answer is negative. So that's how we would approach it. Let me highlight my answer there and then go on to the next one. All right, let's go on to this one now. So I've got sine of -11 pi on 6. In this case, because it's sine of a negative, the negative comes out the front. And now I'm going to break up this angle. I'm going to make it 12 pi on 6 minus pi on 6. This is the same as 2 pi minus pi on 6. This takes me to my fourth quad. I know sine is negative in my fourth quadrant, right? Now, because this is already negative, I'm going to end up with two negatives which are going to cancel out and my answer is going to be positive. So that's really important there, that step right there, realizing that because sine is negative in my fourth quadrant, but this thing is already negative, so the two negatives are going to cancel and give me a positive. So now I just need to figure out what is sine pi on 6, which I know is just going to be a half. Again, if you're struggling to get that exact value, you can just use your special triangle. All right, the last one here. I'm going to take this negative out the front. Whoops. 2 pi on 3. Then I'm going to rewrite this as negative tan, and I'll rewrite it as 3 pi on 3 minus pi on 3. And then once I've done that, I'll rewrite it once again as this, because now it's very easy to see that this is going to be in my second quadrant. And yet again, tan is going to be negative in my second quadrant. Two negatives are going to make a positive. So now I just need to figure out tan of pi on 3, and that's going to be the square root of 3. Again, if you're struggling with that, just use your special triangle. Okay, let's go into our last ones here, which do pose a bit of an issue because the numbers are just bigger. And when they're bigger, it makes things a bit harder. Again, we know that when it's cos of a negative, the negative just goes away. So we're just dealing with this. And now, this is the hard part. We need to break this up into something that is manageable. What can we break that up into? And also, we need to do it in such a way that we get an angle that is in the first quadrant as well. And so let's just think about that for a minute. What it could be is cos of 18 pi. Let's go 18 pi. 18 pi on 3. Ooh. And then what I would have to plus onto that is 3 pi on 3. So important here, 18 pi plus 3 pi is 21 pi. And then what's also important here is that 18 divided by 3 is going to be 6 pi. And then here, this is going to be pi. Now, according to our rule, we know that when we plus 2 pi onto something, so this is a symmetrical property, when we plus 2 pi onto something, it's just the same thing as this. Well, this is just 2 pi plus 2 pi plus 2 pi. It's just going around the circle 3 times and coming back to where we started. So all I have to do is consider that, and I know that's going to be -1. So that's going to be my answer, cos of -1, just like that. So nothing too tricky there. The only hard part is knowing how to break that up. But if you just take your time, it will be fine. But the moral of the story is just take your time with these questions and think what is the most efficient way to break it up. Okay, let's go on to our next one. When I've got sign of a negative, that negative needs to come out the front. So I've got this now. Okay, again, we need to think about how we're going to break this up. So let's just give me a second here. Okay, I think we can break it up like this. So if I make this 18 pi on 6, and then plus onto that 2 pi on 6, what I'm going to end up with is 3 pi here, plus now 2 pi on 6 is going to be pi on 3. And I know what pi on 3 is. Now, here's another important part. If I've got 3 pi, that's the same thing as 2 pi plus pi on 3, right? This 2 pi is just not doing anything. It's just doing a 360. So that means I can just ignore it and I can just deal with this. Then once I've got that, I know that this is going to be in my third quad. I know that sine is negative in my third quad. So therefore, because there's already a negative there, those two negatives are going to cancel. It's going to be positive sine pi on 3. And then sine pi on 3 is going to be the square root of 3 on 2. Again, if you're not sure how to get that exact value, just use your special triangle. So there was a couple tricky steps there. Perhaps the trickiest part was breaking it up into such a way that it becomes intelligible, and then realizing that if I have that, I can just break that up into 2 pi plus pi. 2 pi I can then just ignore and then just deal with this part of it. Okay, let's go through our last example here, and then hopefully you feel well prepared to complete the exercise. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We've got tan of negative 19 pi on 4. I'm going to take that negative out the front, which is going to leave me here. And again, I need to break this up. This one actually isn't that hard to break up. I'm just going to break it up into 20 pi on 4 minus pi on 4. That's going to give me 20 divided by 4 is 5 pi minus pi on 4. And then I'm going to do that same technique. I know that 5 pi is simply 4 pi plus pi minus pi on 4, right? So this 4 pi here is just, it's just going around the circle twice. So I can just ignore it and just deal with this part of it right here. So it's just going to be negative tan pi minus pi on 4. That is going to take me to my second quad. My second quad, tan is negative. It's already negative, so it's going to become positive. So it's just going to be positive tan pi on 4. And that's just going to be 1. If you're not sure how to get that exact value, use your special triangle. But that's how we would approach it. So again, this one, what makes these questions just a little bit trickier is because the numbers are bigger, it might just take a bit longer to figure out what you need to break them up into, because remember, you just can't break them up into anything. You need to make sure that you get pi on 4 there, or like pi on 3 or pi on 6 or whatever you're dealing with, and then you can then use your symmetrical properties to then arrive at your last final answer. And also remember, if it's already negative and then you're in a quadrant that makes it negative, it becomes positive. Okay, so that's everything you need to know. Hopefully all that made sense. And yeah, that's the end of this lesson. So part 1, 2, and 3. Hopefully you found this useful. Good luck in your exercise. If you have any questions, come find me.